So I went in March 2015 for a routine eye examination to my local Specsavers. I know there's a Specsaver person here today, but was a young optometrist there, and I could sense straight away that he was concerned, about my eye. He got an older colleague in to have a look as well, and they conferred and actually said to me that there was something in my retina that they were concerned about, and that I needed to go to an ophthalmologist, fairly soon. So I hadn't had too many symptoms. I'd been cleaning my glasses more, thinking the lenses were scratched. Not too much. I've been saying to Glenn, who I always drive home from dinners and parties, that I can't see very well at night anymore, and but nothing really out of the ordinary. So the next day I went to a Toowoomba ophthalmologist, and he had a really busy clinic and fitted me in. He was sort of dashing between about 3 consulting rooms, and my eyes were dilated. I had a retinal scan, and he came back with the news, on his next visit into my room, that he said, I have a tumour of my choroid. It's large. He's nearly 100% sure that it was a melanoma. He's sending me to Brisbane, but expect that I would have my eye removed. And it was, that sort of dramatic. And I think I asked some disjointed questions, which I can't remember at the moment, but I can remember him saying that, you're going to have to be stoic about this. And it was something I took away with me. I've got to be stoic about this. And although it was, hard words to hear, I had this sort of deep sense in the car park when your eyes are dilated and streaming with pain because of the harsh Queensland sun. But I thought I do have to be, strong about this. You can't sugarcoat it. And even at that early stage, I sort of realised the severity of it. And I was much more concerned about my kids, and my husband, my father, my sisters, everyone around me. I was really aware that, they would be devastated, and I thought, well, I have to be strong for them. So I think this sort of reaction, I've heard it from other people too, and sometimes that's a mum thing. They worry about everybody else and not themselves. Okay, this is Wickham Terrace. I've seen a lot of Wickham Terrace in the last few years, and I often have a cup of coffee and a sandwich by the old mill at Wickham Terrace. Is Brisbane's oldest building. It was convict built, and I like it. So this scan picture I'm showing on the slide here was the photo I had in Toowoomba that I took to Dr. Warrior, and he then went on to do an ultrasound, which I think is more definitive. And I only put this up because I found it the other day, but you can actually see my melanoma is one of these atypical ones that's really on the edge of the eyeball. It's not an easy one to have been detected. It's right up the top and has that sort of distinctive discoloration, and it's fairly sizable. You can see in the cross section there. So it would have been hard to pick this up. Dr. Warrior said even with dilated eye exams, so they can be missed. So I saw Dr. Warrior on the Friday of the same week. My eye was removed the following Thursday after a PET CT scan, just screening for Mets, and I was told that should Mets be present, then it makes any eye treatment sort of unnecessary. They've got to try and deal with the Mets. So it sounds a bit bizarre, but I just was really pleased to get my eye out, because it meant that I could move on with my life, and it wasn't anywhere else. And again, it was one of those that was of a size that it was hard to give local treatment to this that wasn't probably going to cause problems down the track. So enucleation was a good option. So I went through the next few weeks with the amazing help of my family and one son who was in, where was he? South America somewhere, Guatemala or somewhere obscure. And my other son and his wife, Jackie, they just looked after me so well. I was ferried everywhere like a VIP and taken to every appointment. I was never alone. And, and my husband's amazing support as well. So throughout all this, I just had the feeling, look, I've got a really good team and I can get through it as grim as it was at the time. So the other thing that I did, I was quite aware that I really was distant to everything. I was over here watching what was happening to everybody else, and I just had this feeling it was going on, not to me, but to another patient, and I was dissociated really from, a lot of the procedures. And again, this must be a coping mechanism that, I was an observer rather than a participant, and that helped me to get through the next days and weeks. So then I had to return home, which I couldn't wait to do. I just, love our farm and our animals, and, we have these incredible vistas, like it was, this fantastic views and big horizons, and some of you may know the sort of Darling Downs skies and clouds and sunsets and everything. And it was one of the things I just kept thinking about, when I can actually go for a walk and I feel comfortable enough and I can go outside, a few days after returning home. But this is what happened. I walked outside and that's what you feel. You just feel like your world's cut in half, besides the fact I've lost a couple of cows, which is a bit of a worry, but, it wasn't and trees, so it wasn't, the actual restricted vision. It was this horrible abyss that I was looking at on the right side. So it really was an awful feeling, and I thought, am I going to live with this all my life? And it was like a big black hole, and it was terrible. But it actually, you adjust to that, and it takes a few weeks or a month. I'm sure there's other people in the room too that could sort of explain their own feelings, but you start to adjust psychologically. You learn to move your head more, and maybe there's some new visual pathways that are set up, I'm not sure, but that feeling of this sort of angry bisected view and this big black hole that just dominated everything, that was only there for a few months. And now I don't feel that. I've certainly got restricted vision, but not this sort of angry blackness is probably the best way to describe it. So you have to wait a few weeks to receive a prosthetic eye, and we had Trevor Doherty was one of the other medical people that I've visited quite a lot in Wickham Terrace as well, but he's an ocularist that can fashion a new prosthetic eye that goes on, in my case, 6 weeks after. And certainly life improved after that. I was able to leave the farm a bit more, and you felt more like going out and being part of the world again. And I think since that time I've never really realised before what the power of cosmetic devices or prosthesis are to patient healing and getting back on track again. So I really worry for people that can't get these services quickly, or if their eye condition precludes getting a prosthetic eye, and that does sometimes happen if they have to lose part of the socket or whatever. So I was just one of the lucky ones. A couple of weeks after my surgery, I visited our family's long-term GP, and he was shocked. He'd never heard of ocular melanoma. None of his colleagues had heard of ocular melanoma. Last time he saw me, I was fine, and this time I wasn't. And a medical student with him said, what a lot of people used to say, like, you're so calm and you're so, in control, and, how can you be like that? You're amazing. And his words were, they're probably a bit prophetic, but, he's probably seen a lot too, and he just said, look, you might feel like that now, but grief or anxiety can strike at any stage, and come and talk to him if it does. So, he'd seen people, that cope quite well initially, and then down the track things start to get too much for them. Okay, my parking. I'm a champion driver on the open road, but I have a bit of a problem in tight spaces. And I live with the traffic warden that goes around each night and adjusts the bollards in our garage, and sometimes he doesn't know that I know he does this, but he reverses my car out and parks it better. So and although I'd like to say these photos were taken 2 years ago, they're a lot more recent than that. So and my other worry is we've just had a big tractor shed built. So at some stage I've got to get on the tractor with the big front end loader and park it in this new shed, and I'm really terrible in tight spaces, still am, just have not adjusted to, where I am looks different to what it actually is. So, yes, just one of the hiccups of having one eye. Okay, so March 2015 was my diagnosis, and all went fairly smoothly until Christmas. And note to myself, don't ever get a liver scan or anything done like the week before Christmas. I will never do it again, because I think all your emotions are heightened at that time of the year. But I had a scan and it came back with some spots on the liver, and I just didn't know what it meant, and I ended up getting referred, and she kindly fitted me into Dr. Atkinson at Greenslopes Oncology just for an opinion. And she said they were, the same advice that we've heard tonight, is there's very little you can do for Mets, that most of them go to the liver in OM patients, and should they be there, there's very little except for surgery that, is curable. So the last place I wanted to be on Christmas Eve was in an oncology unit, but that's where I was. She wanted me to speak to a liver surgeon, and I spoke to him finally over New Year. And what he wanted to happen was just to have repeat scans. So these machines are really highly sensitive, and there's lots of lesions that can occur in the liver, and the tiny little spots, and they're only a few millimetres big, have not been a problem since, or grown or multiplied or anything like that. So I take his advice now, and I have a 6-monthly MRI in Brisbane with his radiologist that he trusts, and that's been my surveillance since then. And as Dr. Worry mentioned, that's an out-of-pocket expense in Australia. There's no cover for MRIs. So Christmas, I was a blubbering mess, and I don't know where the calm, collected Nicki was. She was missing in action, but I was anxious. I wasn't sleeping. I was sure this was our last Christmas together, and I'd had to have my kids with me, and they probably thought their mum was a loony, or more than a loony than I usually am. But that time, I think it sort of struck home just. This, it is a serious disease, and you really don't know, what's ahead. So I understood that people's reaction to cancer diagnosis varies. You can be in denial, you can accept it, you can want to know everything regardless of how bad that news is, or you can want to know nothing because it might be bad news. And I understand that because I've been all of those people, and it really is just the stage of your journey that you're on, I guess. And there's no right or wrong. It's just where you are in in that particular time. So after this scary liver scan, I did have a change of heart and think, well, I wasn't in denial. I always accepted it, and I always coped with it. But I was coping with my eye more than anything else. I was just coping with trying to live with one eye and not worrying too much about what would happen if, or what was the next step. So the next time I went to see Sunil, I just asked a few more questions, he'd always said, "I'll tell you the pathology results if you want to know them at any stage, just let me know." And I sort of thought, well, it's better for me anyway, just to have them out in the open. So I know mine is a sizable tumour. It's monosomy 3 and the cell type's epithelioid, which is information that suggests a moderate to high metastatic potential. So you'd think that might make things worse or make me feel worse, but it didn't. I've just felt like, well, I know that now and I'm a little bit more empowered. So I am resolved to, keeping up the surveillance and to stay informed. And, it's really good to be part of an evening like this where you feel that you can, impact the landscape of ocular melanoma a little bit in Australia through patient advocacy. And I also encourage everyone I know to have eye checks and dilated eye exams as well, and to wear good sunglasses. Okay, also about this time, I started to just read through some of the forums. I'm not on Facebook, but some of the forums from overseas, from Britain and America, are really informative. And some of the organisations in the States, particularly Cure OM and Lauren Johnson there, and Ocular Melanoma Foundation, the chairman Grant Allen, sort of just got in contact too. But I didn't meet Kym until November last year, so this was nearly 18 months after diagnosis, and I hadn't met or spoken to anyone that had had ocular melanoma until that time. And it's ridiculous, but she lives just up the road from me, a big state like Queensland, and she's on the western side of Toowoomba, on a bit further west, so we can meet up and talk regularly. And it is helpful to know someone that's been, on the same whitewater ride that you have, and, has all the same concerns. So this year we were also asked to be part of the OM Warriors video, which is an international video for OM patients. And this remarkable young lady's from Melbourne, Jess. She's had a real battle, and she was in it as well. So there was 3 Australians, but people from all over the world, with facing the same fight, but with we hope sort of a good message of hope for the future. So I got fantastic medical care, and that's really thanks to Dr. Warrior and Trevor Doherty. I can't complain at all. I think we're very fortunate in Australia. But if I lacked for anything, it was probably just a contact name at the time, just a brochure that I might have just shoved in a drawer and forgotten about for 12 months with OM facts or contacts. But maybe at some stage I would have thought, well, it might be nice to talk to someone and reach out to someone. So MPA and Kym and everything that's happened since has actually been through talking with Jane from QMIR. And, it was a series of phone conversations over a few weeks in November last year. So there's also great help via Susan here with her Facebook and her phone support as well. So I think it's been a really positive experience for me, just being part of a community instead of, on my own. Okay. So my commitment now is just to try and live life really well. It's 2 years and 4 months post-diagnosis, and I think I'm in a fairly, safe spot after, what's been a rough crossing. But you don't know what's ahead, whether it's calm or stormy, but I don't think anyone knows what's ahead of them. So I just think that you just live your life the way you feel you should, and, with as many positive aspects to your life as you possibly can. So when you get such a diagnosis, I think there's a loss of innocence. Your life will never ever be the same as what it was pre-cancer diagnosis, but that doesn't mean it's a bad life, and my life's amazing. It's very, very good. So yes, there's been grieving, and there's worry, sometimes the anxiety creeps back when scans are due again until I get my results. But basically, I don't sort of live thinking every single day that I'm going to die from OM. So that anxiety is no way is it a constant companion. And just some of the ways I cope. I mean, nature's really important to me, and my art. I probably should choose a safer art form that doesn't involve wire and pliers, because I've only got one eye, but it's fun. And I like gardening and growing our own food. I do yoga and just walk every day and just try and stay as fit and healthy as I possibly can. I am very lucky, I think, with my family support, and they're amazing. Every one of them that sort of helps me just in small ways quite often, but just by being there. And I'd just like to say how fantastic tonight's been as well, and how positive, just talking to a few people at the break, that there's people working towards a cure, but working to help people in small ways as well, and the small ways are actually really big ways and the really important ways. So thank you very much.
So cancer. Up until 2005, cancer had no place in my life. Cancer was not in my plans. But that all changed when I was 36 years old, and after noticing blurry vision in one eye, I was diagnosed with ocular melanoma. Not a common, well-known cancer, but a rare, not often heard about cancer. Not a diagnosis that I was expecting at all. That was the beginning of a medical and emotional roller coaster ride. It's a ride I continue on today. A ride that would challenge me. It would challenge my body to overcome this, and it would challenge my mind to cope with it. Having been lucky enough to not have had any medical issues previously, it was a terrifying and it was a big adjustment. Although it was over 11 years ago, I remember it like it was yesterday. So what's it like to hear that you have OM? It's like being hit by a truck, knocked sideways, never really being able to get yourself back upright. I was thrown into a new world, a world that I knew nothing about. There was incredible fear. What was this disease I'd never heard of? Will I survive this? And if I do, what will it do to me? What will it do to my vision? Will treatment work for me? That was a big question. How will I cope, and how will my family cope? So many questions, and they were constantly swirling. I was fearful of this new world. There was also incredible sadness. My world had stopped spinning the way it used to, and it was spinning in a new direction, one which I had no control over. Would it ever be the same again? I was to learn the answer to that is no. I was to learn I would come out of this a different person with a different perspective on life. I would learn that I would have to create a new normal, one that would include OM forever. Throw into this mix of emotions an occasional snippet of hope. I was hopeful of the best possible outcome, but fearful of the worst at the same time. In my desperation to learn more about this disease and to find some hope, I did what most people do, and I spent many hours with Dr. Google. But this really just confused and frightened me more. I was very lucky to have amazing family and friends supporting me, and for this I'll be forever grateful. OM's not something that you want to face alone. I was lucky enough to be referred to the wonderful Dr. Glasson. For the first time since being diagnosed, I felt some real hope. Here was my team, and they were going to fight with me. I remember he held my hand, looked directly at me and said, "I will save your life first, your eyes second, and your vision third." As a patient in utter turmoil, they are powerful words and exactly what I needed to hear. Along with Dr. Finnegan, they have been with me all the way along this journey. I don't have enough words to describe how caring and compassionate they have been. And as all cancer patients know, it means everything to have this kind of team behind you. They saved my life. So what was treatment like? I had a plaque treatment with a 4-day stay in hospital in isolation in a radiation-safe room. It was a lonely and scary 4 days. The side effects of the radiation hit me hard over the next 3 months. I was unable to continue working. I was extremely fatigued. I had headaches and eye pain. And looking back, I was most likely depressed. Being a busy, on-the-go person, I found the slow recuperation difficult and very frustrating. I was also waiting to see if the plaque had been successful. And as we all know, the waiting's just worst. At my 6-week post-plaque check, I had the good news. My tumour was 0.1 of a millimetre smaller. I remembered I had a smile again that day. The tumour was heading in the right direction. Over the next year, I had TTT therapy twice. This combined treatment was successful, and to date, I have been lucky to have my disease under control. But throughout that year, I was also learning to live with severely decreased vision. A world full of changes had been thrust upon me. Another challenge, this time to my confidence. So what's it like to live with OM? Currently, my surveillance plan includes a visit to my ocular oncologist every 12 months, with 6 monthly chest and abdominal CT scans in between. I find myself living in blocks between appointments. The fear and anxiety surrounding these times just never gets any easier. I am hopeful of a good outcome, but at the same time, preparing myself to hear the worst. While I have a little vision in my OMI, I found the adjustment of essentially being monocular very difficult. It's over 11 years since treatment, and I still notice every day that my vision is compromised. Uneven ground, stairs, and visual clutter are some of the challenges OM patients face every day. Sometimes we can laugh about the constant tripping or misjudging the distance or bumping into people or things, and sometimes we cry. But every time we continue on, happy to be given the chance to be here and well. But in all this, where was my tribe? With OM being a rare disease, it was extremely difficult to find other patients, other people who were dealing with what I was. I felt I needed someone to say, I know what it feels like to be diagnosed with OM. I know what it feels like to have plaque treatment. I know what it's like to lose most of the vision in your eye. And I understand your fear. You are not alone with your diagnosis. There wasn't the fabulous online support that there is today, and it was several years before I connected with other patients. Fortunately, I found MPA, and the connections I've made since have just been invaluable. So as OM patients, what do we need? From each other, we need connectedness. Someone who truly understands. This is so important to our emotional health. From our family and friends, we need your wonderful support, sometimes in practical ways, like accompanying us to appointments, and very often in emotional ways when it just gets a little too much. This lightens our load. And from our doctors and our researchers, keep being our heroes. You give us hope. And to a cancer patient, hope is everything. A cancer diagnosis affects so many parts of us, our health and well-being, as well as our emotional and mental health. Today I try to make every day great. I love spending time with my family and friends and visiting new places, and my passion is photography. While I will live with OM forever, I have a second chance and I want to make the most of it. I will not allow OM to impact on the quality of my life. I am a survivor. I am passionate about support for OM patients, and our aim, with the help of Melanoma Patients Australia, is to be visible and connect with patients who need support. We are your tribe. Thank you.